Sean laughed and said, "I can wait a while. You're just tired of me winning." He ordered a pizza for dinner, and Sean changed his pull-up as they waited for the delivery. When it arrived, they downloaded a movie to the living room TV to watch while they ate. It was a kids' movie about a little boy with an instinctive talent for business management who was elected CEO of a major corporation. The humor was, of course, very juvenile, with one worker joking that the new boss was still in diapers and the kid's assistant demanding a raise after she was shown gagging through changing him. The climax of the movie centered around an extended board meeting in which the protagonist's rival tried to take over the company. His rival knew a lot about negotiating techniques, but he ultimately lost because nobody was allowed to leave the meeting until all terms of the new contract were agreed upon. The poor man wound up wetting himself because he waited too long to go to the bathroom, and he ran from the room to find a new pair of pants, saying, "You win. It's all yours." The kid looked at the camera and said, "Never go against a guy who doesn't need bathroom breaks." Around 9 o'clock, Sean started to get Mason ready for bed. He had his brother take a shower, and then he put him into his overnight diaper. Finally, Mason brushed his teeth and slipped into bed. Sean stayed up a little while longer before swapping his trainer, which was dry this time, for a thicker overnight. He settled into his sheets and soon fell asleep. Some time later, Sean opened his eyes to Mason saying his name. He glanced up and saw the kid standing beside his bed in the moonlight coming through the window. "What?" he asked sleepily. "I had a nightmare, and I'm scared. Can I sleep with you?" The voice was small and whiny, and Sean couldn't help but feel sorry for him. "Sure, bro, come on." He pulled the sheets back, and Mason clambered onto the bed, snuggling up to his big brother. He immediately started sniffling. "Hey, what's wrong? What are you so scared of?" "I had a dream that Mom and Dad had a wreck and died," the little boy said, almost wailing, clutching his little raccoon. Sean hugged him tightly and said, "It's okay, buddy. It was just a dream. Mom and Dad are fine. They'll be home tomorrow night. Promise?" "Yeah, I promise. Now, come on, go back to sleep." Mason slowly stopped sniffling, and the two boys eventually drifted off again. The next day, Mason's friend Jesper came over to play. Mason noticed his friend's new Robo-Cheetah's diaper bag and said, "Hey, cool bag. Where'd you get it?" "Thanks," Jesper said. "My mom bought it from Kidco because she said my old one was too ratty." The kids went up to Mason's room to play while Sean did his homework. After a while, he had to change both of the boys, though he was fortunate that they were only wet. A little while after Jesper left, Mom and Dad got home from their trip. Mason, still anxious over his dream the night before, ran to them and hugged each of them, not wanting to let go. "Somebody sure did miss us," Dad said. "My God, didn't Sean feed you while we were gone?" Mason said yes, not realizing that his dad was joking. "Oh. Then I guess you don't want any of this chicken we brought home. KFC. Aha. All right." And just like that, he was over the trauma of having his parents gone for the weekend. Sean ate, then went up to his room for a little personal time after his babysitting job. As he sat at his computer going through some pictures, he felt some pressure in his stomach. He put off going to the bathroom and continued browsing, but the pressure soon grew too great to ignore. For some reason, he really didn't want to use the bathroom. It had been a while since he'd messed his pants, so he decided it was okay and stood up from his chair. He squatted a bit and gave a little push, feeling the shit began to slide out of him and pile up under his ass. It took a minute for him to push it all out, and somehow, even though he was wearing a poopy pull-up, he felt good. He took it off, balled it up, and tossed it into his pail. He wiped himself off, then took a long shower, jerking off under the hot spray. A year later, Sean and Sienna were still seeing each other and had fallen in love. She was out of training pants by now, and with her help and encouragement, Sean was having fewer accidents, except at night. They saw each other as much as possible, which was often, but finding privacy was difficult. He still lived with his mom and dad, but they believed their 20-year-old son's sex life was his business, and Sienna's parents had the same attitude, although they did encourage caution. The only problem was that Sean's mom and dad didn't want Mason asking too many questions. He was at a curious age, but they thought he was much too young to worry about why Sienna was sleeping in Sean's room, so they didn't let her spend the night if Mason was home. This still left them frequent opportunities to be together since the little brother was now change-trained and had begun to go on more sleepovers. Sean and his girlfriend were well on their way to a healthy, rewarding, and productive adult life for the two of them, and their families were very happy about their kids' relationship. One morning, Sean went to see Dr. Mendelsohn for his regular checkup. Of course, he had to wait several minutes before the doctor saw him, so he flipped through some magazines on his phone as he sat in the lobby. He glanced through an article about the new action movie, Street Soldiers, starring a cast of mostly young actors in their early 20s. Sean skimmed the parts about how well the cast got along on set and how challenging some of the roles were. He wanted to read about the sexy nude scene with Kaya Dorner that everybody was talking about. He finally found a small mention of it, but it didn't tell him anything he didn't already know. Just below that was something about the difficulties of making a movie with actors who were toilet training. The article said that all the young members of the cast were still in trainers and included a quote from Bryson Bennett, the 22-year-old muscular heartthrob that all the girls and gay guys were wild over. "Oh, yeah, I've been really busy the past couple of years, and bathroom breaks are hard to come by on a set, so I think that's really slowed me down. Some days aren't so bad, but sometimes I go through a lot of easy UPS, especially since I still wet at night a lot." The nurse finally called his name, so he put his phone away and went back to see the doctor. Everything looked good, and Mendelsohn was pleased at his progress in training, so his checkup was over before he knew it. The next day, Sean rushed out of his programming mechanics class and headed for the bathroom. It had almost been a week since his last accident in that class, which was scheduled at the same time as his old lit class with Professor Forder, where he used to wet almost every day. He had definitely progressed in his training, and it was obvious in the fact that a pack of pull UPS lasted longer for him. He still had accidents, but they were much less frequent. Having emptied his bladder, he stepped away from the urinal and turned to see Jenna walking out of one of the changing stalls. "Jenna." "Hey, Shauna. Haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing?" "Not bad, just busy." "Yeah, me too." "Hey, are you busy this weekend?" Jenna asked. "Sienna and I are doing something, but we don't know what yet." "Then you gotta come to this party Gavin's throwing. It's gonna be big trouble." Sean thought for a second. A party meant accidents, but he hadn't been having a lot of those lately, and he had been studying really hard. And Sienna said just the other day that she hadn't been to a good party in a while. "Okay, we'll be there." "Great. You know the place, right?" Sean nodded. "All right. See you there." That Saturday, Sienna picked up a small package of girls' pull UPS, pulled one on, and packed a few spares into the diaper bag she had stopped carrying a couple of months ago. Sean picked her up and drove the two of them over to Gavin's house. The night air was cold, so the guests were mostly staying in the house, which was crammed with kids having fun. Sean grabbed a couple of beers, and they started mingling. They soon found their way to the family room, where a holding contest was obviously well underway. Jenna was there, and it was obvious from the tint on the padding of his easy-up that he had already lost, and he wasn't the only one. Out of 11 contestants, only 4 were left: Aiden, a girl named Kara, and 2 guys Sean didn't know. They had walked in just in time to see Aiden, jumping and jerking around in the awkward movements known as the PP dance, lose control and flood his pull-up. Kara was next a minute later, and the 2 strangers lasted another 5 minutes before one of them, a tall jock, stopped moving as the crotch of his pull-up began to darken. As soon as he was declared the winner, the other guy, who had dark hair and an average build, let go and started wetting. Sean and Sienna moved on, mingling and drinking as they went, and Sean soon felt the need to pee. Having learned to hold it, he hesitated for a second before he reminded himself that the bathrooms would all be occupied and let go, feeling a rush of pee in his pants. He snagged another beer and moved on. A while later, he peed again and turned to tell Sienna he was going to change, but when he looked at her, he saw her wincing in effort. She caught his gaze and smiled self-consciously. "I thought I could wait until we left, but I can't hold it anymore." She let out a muffled fart as her effort began to pay off. He smiled back and said, "Let me know when you're done, and we'll both go change." When she finished a couple of minutes later, they started making their way through the crowd to a bathroom. They had to wait several minutes once they had made it to the door, but they finally had the room to themselves. Sean took off his soggy pull-up as Sienna started wiping herself off, grateful for the pouch in the seat that had been designed to droop under the weight of a messy accident and help contain it. Once they had changed, they went back out into the party and were both wet again in no time. They stayed at Gavin's late into the night, leaving only when both of them were wearing the last pull UPS they had with them. They spoke to Gavin before they left and let it slip that Sean's 21st birthday was coming up in a couple of weeks. He wouldn't let them leave until they had agreed to let him throw another for the occasion. The next day, Sean slept in a bit and was still tired when he finally got out of bed. Feeling the need to recover from the night before, he sat around the house all day, playing games and watching TV. When he had to pee during a game, he played on, confident in the control he had recently developed. He was surprised when, a minute later, he felt pee suddenly flooding his pull-up. He quickly changed into a dry one, and for the rest of the day, he went to the bathroom as soon as he felt the need to go. On Monday morning, he had an accident during his prog mech class and another one during another class. By then, it was clear that Gavin's party had set him back a bit. He had to concentrate and try very hard to hold it when he had to pee and get to a bathroom as soon as he could to compensate for the damage. He was doing better by the end of the week, so he stopped worrying about it. By the time the next week had come to an end, he was ready for the birthday party Gavin was throwing him. Sienna bought another pack of pull UPS, and they went to his party, which had to be held somewhere else since Gavin's parents were home that night. The young couple was there all night long, and both of them went through several pairs of pull UPS. The next day, Sean started having accidents again, and again they continued past the weekend. He figured they would slow down by the end of the week like they had before, but by Friday, he had wet at least once every day. He kept trying to stay dry and go when he needed to, but he still found that he couldn't always hold it as long as he needed to. Even worse, on Wednesday he shat his pull-up as he walked out of his last class of the day. When he wet that Saturday afternoon and messed during the movie he took Sienna to that night, it was clear that he had relapsed. His goal of getting out of pull UPS now seemed further away than ever. His dad was worried. "You were doing so well. What happened?" Sean shook his head. "I guess it was those parties I went to. You need to slow down on the partying." "I know, Dad. I didn't plan on going out that much. It just happened. I went to Gavin's, and then he found out my birthday was coming up and insisting on throwing me another one to celebrate." His dad squeezed his shoulder. "Just be diligent and patient. It'll get better." The next day was Sean's birthday. He celebrated with Sienna and his family, then drove over to Jonathan's house to hang out for a while. Jonathan knew about his relapse, of course, but the only thing he said about it was, "That sucks." Jonathan wasn't doing much better himself, which was obvious by the way he suddenly grabbed his crotch while they were watching TV. In their early 20s, they both felt a certain amount of pressure from the world around them to be trained by now, but when they were together, they could relax, be themselves, and grow and learn at their pace. Sean stayed there for the rest of the day, and that evening, they went out and got some dinner together. Sienna didn't mind because she understood that Sean needed some bro time. When he got home that night, he got ready for bed and browsed the news on his homepage before turning in. He clicked the link for one headline that caught his eye: sales of adult diapers on the rise. The article reported that a lot of people his age, and even some who were older, were having problems learning the toilet. Most of them kept wearing trainers, but others were simply giving up and going back to diapers. There was a quote from a 27-year-old woman who worked in insurance: "I just kept having accidents. No matter how hard I tried to make it to the bathroom, I kept wetting myself. I was having accidents every day, and of course, diapers give better protection than trainers, so I switched. I just wish there was something better for adults." Companies like Diaper and Tenor had seen their sales increase over the past few years, even though many echoed the insurance workers' reluctance at wearing those products. A 25-year-old man who had recently graduated college and started his career in business management said, "All the diapers for adults right now look so clinical and ugly, and they're not very comfortable. Most of them are covered in plastic, and they all just look like they're for old people. I wish Huggies would make a larger size because Pull UPS don't really cut it for me either." A statistic was quoted that suggested that 57% of adults aged 18 to 22 would buy Pampers or Huggies if they were produced for adults. That made Sean stop and think for a minute. It had only been a few years since he'd stopped wearing diapers, but he had already forgotten much of the way they felt. Now that he thought about it, he realized that Pull UPS was somehow not quite as comfortable as his old Huggies. It may have been the contrast in purposes because Pull UPS are, of course, only meant to absorb accidents as one learns to use the toilet, which implies a certain amount of pressure to maintain control until a toilet was available. In short, there was stress involved in training pants that he had never felt from diapers. Sean thought he could understand why some people would want to return to that, but he brushed the feeling off. He had been proud and excited to begin a new phase of his life when he graduated to trainers, and he wouldn't want to just cast all that aside. It didn't matter, anyway, because they didn't make Huggies in his size.